I have the honor right now of introducing our next speaker, and I really appreciate him being our last speaker, and it takes a lot of guts to be the last speaker of the three-day symposium. So that is, we're honoring and we're welcoming Vice Admiral John Hill. He's the 11th Director of the Missile Defense Agency. He became that director in June of 2019. He oversees MDA's global mission to develop, deliver, and sustain layered capabilities to defend deployed forces, the United States, allies, friends, against ballistic missile attacks in all phases of flight. Please join me in welcoming Vice Admiral John Hill.
Well, thank you, General. I appreciate that very kind introduction, and I do appreciate all of you hanging for the last speaker who's probably in the wrong uniform. I noticed that Captain Joel Uzarski was in his blues. I'll pick on him later for that. But no, awesome. Great to be here. Thanks again for your time, and I see other people in whites. That's a beautiful thing. I'd like to thank General Formica. Dick, thanks so much for inviting me and allowing me to share time with you today. My good friend and battle buddy, General Karbler, for making sure I was arriving on time, and that's fantastic. I want to thank our government teams, our academia teams, our folks from industry who make all things happen in the missile defense world as part of the broader missile defense enterprise. But most importantly, I want to thank our operational forces. I see many of you in the audiences today because you're the ones that allow us to go to bed at night and sleep peacefully and not worry about things in a really tough national security environment today. So when I come, can I go flip slide, please? Yeah. So part of this forum that I really enjoy is that opportunity to learn new things. And I tell you, the few times that I've been able to come to the SMD conference, I walk away with some really important nuggets, learn a lot, but more importantly, I get to meet a lot of really fantastic people. To meet the 94th AAMDC and the 32nd yesterday was a highlight because we've been working so closely with both of those gentlemen and their staffs, and it's really just been a fantastic opportunity. I want to tell you just a little bit of a story when I rolled in off of sea duty and washed up on the shores of the Naval Sea Systems Command. I was stumbling around and someone said, "You need to go meet Admiral George Meinig." And I said, okay, and had not met a flag officer before, so I was a little bit nervous, and I walked in, and I did my usual. I tripped on something and leaned down to see what that was, and it was this kind of oblong oak plaque that had some brass relief on it that didn't look like the normal head and shoulders of some retired admiral from yesteryear. It looked like something I would see in church. And I wasn't sure what it was, and so I checked out the little brass relief on the bottom, and it said, Bureau of Ordnance. Well, that's interesting, but I don't understand what this saintly thing is. And so there was the first question I asked as a goofball to Admiral Meinig, and he was very kind. John, we used to have a Bureau of Ships, and we used to have a Bureau of Ordnance, and that is St. Barbara, and she is the patron saint of ordnance. I'm like, oh, can I have the plaque? And he said yes, so I still have the plaque, by the way. But, you know, time goes on, and I was honored recently. Again, my good friend, General Karbler, there pulled me at very close to the old farm of George Washington, where they bestowed on me the Ancient Order of St. Barbara. And that is such a cool thing, so I thought I would sport it out today in my whites. So there you go. You know, and classic, say again? Well, thank you. It feels great. Someone said I had it on backwards, but I fixed it. So, you know, and of course the Army, as always, they put a fine point on everything, right? So it's not just ordnance, right? Let's just make it personal. It's stone hurdlers, mortars, field artillery, air defense, rockets, cannoneers. I mean, what's not motivating about that? So anyways, feel great, and again, great to be here. And so, you know, as I started thinking about what to talk about today, you know, just it became obvious that we've been doing this for a long time. Over the course of the last few days, we've talked about the last 20 years. And, you know, the 25th symposium's kind of cool. Not really 20 years because we had multiple symposiums during a few of the years there. But if you just kind of look back, where we were, some pretty striking things, aside from gas prices and the first mating of the sections of the space station in LEO orbit with all that debris up there. And, the fact that we did not have a GMD system deployed, the fact that Aegis ballistic missile defense was kind of just an idea. We didn't have THAAD batteries deployed or tested at that time. It's pretty amazing where we were and where we are today. Next slide, please. So if you kind of look at it from a threat perspective and just go back 20 years, where we were from a strategic missile defense perspective, taking care of the homeland, it was the ballistic threat. And the reason why we were so concerned and remain concerned today is it doesn't require a lot of accuracy when you're lobbing a football up, as demonstrated by Ricky Ellison the other morning when he was throwing balls around. They're terror weapons, right? They don't have to be accurate. They're pointing at population centers, right? So that is something worth protecting the nation against, and that really is the bread and butter of the Missile Defense Agency and many other members of that overall enterprise for defense. Generally back then, ground launched, pretty restricted, but in large numbers, and they remain in large numbers around the globe today. And lots of folks have talked about what's going on in the European theater, the weapon of choice, missiles, because they're unmanned. We've been talking about unmanned vehicles for a while, but a missile is an unmanned vehicle, and they're inexpensive, and you can just bring them out and shoot and scoot. And that's what we're seeing around the globe today, and that's a tough threat. But if you fast forward to where we are today and look at that really hard-to-read picture up in the right, everyone's kind of talked about that, right? It's ballistic, it's cruise, it's air-launched, it's ship-launched, it's submarine-launched, it's ground-launched. It's transportable tail launchers, it's silos. It's pretty complex. So from the viewpoint of the warfighter, when I think about the soldiers that are protecting the maneuver force, at the end game, it all looks the same. It's maneuvering, it's in large numbers, they've got jammers on the front, they are hardened because they're coming through very high heat environments. It's tough when you get to that end game. So it's a mix of that. That's what we're seeing today in Europe. And that's what we expect to see in other places, and it's what we have seen as this threat continues to grow and as it has over the last few years. So thought it was kind of an interesting comparison. Next chart, please. So the mission of the agency, I want to thank Pat for kind of walking through that. I'll emphasize to you the importance of the layered portion of missile defense. All of our operators out here know that you want to kill the archer just as much as you want to kill the arrows. And you do that to save lives, right? Take it out earlier, thin the raid, so that when those large numbers, high maneuvering in the atmosphere, very nasty environment and terminal, that is not the place you want to rely on, right? So you got to take them out in those upper tiers. And that's the whole reason why you have the ground-based interceptors that take it out in space. It's the whole reason why when we deploy forward with our regional forces that we are doing upper tier engagements, that we're engaging at the edge of the environment, and we're engaging down in terminals, so we have multiple shots, and we're impacting the calculus of the adversary. So pretty important mission, and I tell my folks every day, boy, there's no more noble mission than protecting the country. And so I always tell them, you're a stellar team, and it's a noble mission, and don't forget it. So it's easy to wake up in the morning and know what we're doing. So what we have constructed over the last 20 years as we've come from the Strategic Defense Initiative to the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization to MDA is a very broad, full life cycle view, because that's what it takes. You have to make investments in science and technology. There are many of you here in the room today. Dr. Shari Feth, are you here? She's my lead at the Missile Defense Agency. If you don't know Shari, you should meet her. And bringing that technology in and pushing that towards the development cycle, getting it into the systems. I'll talk a little bit about the next generation Interceptor in just a bit. We made investments over the years in multiple kill vehicle technology, and that has come back to us in the proposals and in the two companies that are competing today in NGI. To me, there's no issue crossing the chasm on science and technology going to development if that's what it results in, and that's just a very clear example of jumping across what we normally call the chasm of science and technology, where things can often go to die. Then you have to go into production, you've got a field, and with something like Homeland Defense, you really are very visible when you test. little discussion this morning with Admiral Richard about, when we test, how we test. It is normal course, right? We are validating requirements. Testing is the end state of the system engineering process before we get to the warfighter feedback, which we always want to push back in. And I'm going to talk more about that as we go. Number one, if I have to simplify what our mission is, it is supporting the warfighter. It is getting capability and capacity out there where it matters. And we do nothing without working through the services to get to meeting those combatant command requirements. And so this is a chart that we show in a different form every time we do it because I try to keep it fresh for the peeps. All right, next chart, please. So this is the placemat. I've shown different versions of this over time, but I'm going to tell you about a little bit of a nuance in this one. You generally read it from top to bottom, right? So a very simple framework of detect, control, engage. I know there's planning before you get to that. I know there's a hit and kill assessment on the back end of that, but generally it's about the sensors that you have for all domain awareness. It is about the command and control and the networking. That's typically where our warfighters touch the system, so it's critically important that we get that right every time, whether it's on a ship or if it's up in Schriever Air Force Base for NORTHCOM to fight the war. We got to get that right. And it turns out it's one of the hardest things because it's very hard to describe tracks on the glass, quality of those tracks that go on the glass, and what you actually use for fire control. They're just different. And so we're working very hard to get that right. And in fact, I'll talk about that when we get to defense of Guam in just a bit. And then, of course, you have the warfighting assets, right? And assets, a fun word, but that's the operators, right? When they're on console, they're out there on the pointy end, and they're trying to get the job done. So that's one way to kind of look at it. The other way to kind of look at this chart is from a different set of battles, right? So Homeland Defense is on that left looking down, right? So you see at the end, the end game there is the ground-based mid-course defense. That is how we defend the country against rogue nation ballistic missile defenses. Then you get to the regional fight. That's where we take it forward. And this is the one where if it flies, it dies, right? So we don't really care about attribution. We don't have the reaction time to worry about that, right? So it's nice to talk about what the policy is against certain countries, but when you're in the regional fight out front and things are coming in, you're going to take a shot, right? So those are really important systems. And they really stem from what I consider to be very strong service equity, right? So when you look at the services on the far right, their self-defense systems really come first, right? In order to go inside the second island chain, you're gonna have to defend yourself. And so that's pretty key. But we take those systems and we build upon those so that we can get to these strong, broader regional defenses and then to the homeland defenses. And so that's basically this chart and kind of a relook from the last time I talked to you. Next chart, please. So I want to talk a little bit about GMD, and then I'm going to wrap up with the video here in just a bit. That's going to kind of walk you through ground-based mid-course defense. There's a lot going on in this program. And I got to tell you, when I stepped in as the director back in 19, it wasn't so. So go back to the 20 years when we first emplaced, right? And then we have basically 3 models of those Corvettes sitting in the grounds up there. People like to talk about those all the time, and it's an interesting conversation. But if you are part of strategic deterrence, and if it's critical to protect the nation, you must do service life extension, right? You must do that. And we don't do that alone. If you're going to pull rounds out of the silos and you're going to upgrade them and you're going to re-emplace them, you don't do that by yourself. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Dan Carber's second head of Joint Forces Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense. That operational view that he brings to the table, because we don't have it within the agency, to go work with Northern Command to say, look, we're going to pull one out. We're going to change your ready state, and we're going to do this as fast as we can, and we're going to dam the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and deal with the Alaskan weather. We're going to make it happen, right? So we are moving very quickly through that service life extension program, and that's how we extend the life of what we have today into the 2030s, and that's where we're going today. Full support from Congress and from the department on that. We do a lot of testing. In fact, we're mandated to test every year, and I have to go back and explain to Congress why we can't do that. A couple reasons, right? One, you start to drain your inventory down, and two, a GMD test is incredibly complex, and so the amount of time it takes to pore through that data and determine whether or not you've met the objectives, we can go right in and determine that pretty quickly. But if we continue to pour through that data, and as we bring in the artificial intelligence kind of data mining tools in the future, we'll be able to do it faster and fully go through all of that data. Then we'll be able to maybe test on a more regular basis. But the most recent test we did was called Boost Vehicle Test 03, and what this was demonstrating a two-stage selectable capability within the existing GBIs today, which opens up your battle space, and that's about all I can say to the audience today. When I talked about the SLEP program, I kind of focused in on the interceptors, but it is a full system service life extension program. So resiliency, cybersecurity, redundancy in the ground systems, in the communication links, all of that's being taken into account. And so pretty excited about that. Missile Field 4 on its way to completion, despite weather up in Alaska. So by the way, I was up there last December because, well, General Formica always recommends I go to Alaska in December. Great advice. I mentioned to some of you that I was shocked when I opened the door of the rental car because there was a survival suit in it. So I did it anyway. And the reason I was there was to take delivery, the initial delivery of the long-range discrimination radar up in Clear, Alaska, one of the key components to all-domain awareness for ballistic missile defense. And that was a great event. And so it really kind of drove home for me the joint aspects of something like missile defense. And just to kind of use the GMD program as an example of that and just kind of think through the sequence, right? Space Force assets give us the indications and warning. Army soldiers on console on radars in Japan, operating those radars, getting us to a track. Track continues to go, the SBX radar at sea, Military Sea Lift Command, and the Navy, right, bringing that discrimination data into fire control where we have soldiers on console, where we have the National Guard there doing security force work there up in Fort Greely, and then over to Colorado Springs where we're controlling the border from NORTHCOM, where you have every service represented there. That is true jointness. And that is a great definition of integration, one of the craziest words that I can never define, because when I talk to somebody about integration, it means something different to everyone. But that's just one example of how we can do it technically and how it operationally comes to life. So next generation interceptor, pretty excited about that. Two companies moving like racehorses, and it is just the classic example of how competition can really work. They're running ahead of schedule, but we're still really early in the program, right? We're in between a system requirements review on path to preliminary design. What that means is we're not at critical design review. We're not building anything yet. I'm always surprised at the number of folks who come in and criticize the program. You haven't done this, you haven't done that. We're just past systems requirements review. So give us a chance to get through this program. It's complex. And when you have a missile that has a requirement to defend all 50 states, that's pretty insane. I grew up in the world of tactical missiles as a young officer, and I'd never seen anything that crazy. But it's really great technology. It is what the nation needs, and we are going to deliver, and we're going to get there. So that's my GMD story. Next chart, please. So a little bit more on Dan Carbon and why I think the aspect of having an organization that's focused in on developing and delivering, we can't get to that delivering part without an operational partner. And yes, we have a lot of them. On the Navy side, we have the operational test and evaluation force. We have the Army's version of that. We have the Air Force and Space Force versions of that. But when it comes down to working with the warfighters, sitting down on console, working through techniques, tactics, and procedures and redlining those, that is only an organization that is task-built to go do that can make that kind of happen, right? That is not a staff job. That is the job of JFCC IMD, and I'm always thankful to Dan, and I thank him every day because it's what we need, and it's something that just never ends. When you look at asset management, that's the other thing that is pretty key. When you look at the number of assets around the globe that JFCC IMD is monitoring and assessing, and when we have red time, which is real, red time's not always bad, right? You gotta go do maintenance on systems. You've gotta bring them down. We can't just go in there and just turn stuff off, right, or pull the missile out of the ground. Someone's got to do that coordination with the combatant commands to make sure they're all square with that, and that's another critical role from JFCC IMD. So Dan, I'm just here to publicly thank you, not just for this cool medal, but for what you and your people do every day. It's really a great partnership, and I just want to emphasize that today. Next chart, please. All right, now I want to talk about terminal high altitude area defense. Now, normally as I walk through the tiers from space down to radars and to GMD, I'll take a pit stop on Aegis. And I can't help myself because I'm a Navy guy, right? And so the story right now is we're out there in the Pacific conducting something called Pacific Dragon. And I just want to tell you that when the fleet When our armies and our air forces and our space forces are focused in on readiness, they are doing the reps and sets constantly. And right now, the Navy's out there exercising Pacific Dragon in an allied partnership out there. We launched a target Tuesday night, and a mighty U.S. Navy destroyer launched an SM-3 and took it out. That's exciting. That was not a development shot. What we really got out of that, we shot one of our oldest missiles, and it was very successful. We're doing fleet reliability with that. We're doing our stockpile reliability. But most importantly, we're doing the proficiency of the crew, taking those ships out and doing that sort of engagement. So I'm pretty stoked about that. But let me get back to THAAD. What an incredible system. It's been out for a while. Numbers of rounds, I keep it on the low side here, but it's actually much higher than that in terms of what we're delivering to the Army. We're really proud of our team for doing that. We have the 8th battery funded, and we're working that in concert with the KSA FMS case. And then, of course, THAAD and Patriot interoperability that we've been working for a very specific region. And if you look at what we've been able to do in concert with the Army to remote the THAAD launchers, and for the folks that don't know what that really means, if you have a battery and you're able to break the launchers away and add additional launchers, move the battery back, it gives you some operational advantage. Launching on remote THAAD with the Patriot missile, extending to the full kinematic range of the Patriot missile by leveraging that different sensor. Another great example of integration, right? You got a C-band missile being controlled by an X-band, and back and forth. It's pretty great. And the ability to then talk directly from the THAAD battery to the Patriot launcher to control those missiles, it gives the warfighter that capability to select which missile is most appropriate for those threats. Keeps you from going Winchester in one or the other. Not perfect, right? When you come down to numbers of threats coming in, but it certainly gives the Army forces, the maneuver forces, a lot of advantages by being able to have this capability. I'm really excited. Again, big help from General Carberry and his team to get to the urgent material release of that capability. So we'll be potentially expanding that beyond what we've done. But the big takeaway on this chart, though, was a few months ago, you probably saw this in the news, is we had our first operational intercepts conducted by an FMS country. And that is really cool. And we worked very closely with Central Command to pull that data back and assess how the soldiers did based on training provided by JFCC IMD with those teams, and how well the system performed. And I tell you, it was like textbook. It was really great, and we saved lives, and that's an important thing. And I'm very, very proud of our THAAD team. They continue to do amazing things, and we'll just keep doing it. Next chart, please. A little bit on defense of Guam. This one kind of starts with the requirement, and kind of think back at that placemat chart where I talked about the regional defenses, right? When the combatant command, Indo-PACOM in this case, comes in and says, hey, I've got this really interesting location issue. We need to defend it. We need to fight for and fight from Guam. We need those defenses to come in. He laid down some very simple requirements. Very simple, right? 360-degree coverage, persistent, ready to go. Tough requirement. The department came through an architecture study, lots of debates, lots of discussions on what was the right thing to do, but it all started with the JRICM 2 and 3 threat set. Pretty formidable threat throughout the whole Pacific. We took a look, parsed out what was specific to Guam, and we put together that system that's now reflected in the budget that's on the Hill today. So it's another one of those to where I get a lot of comments about defense of Guam, all the interesting ones, right? Why haven't you solved this? Why haven't you solved that? The program hasn't started. It's in PB 23 on the Hill today. But we did have some department support in 22 and some support from Congress to start doing the really tough stuff. So out there with the 94th and working with USERPAC and Indo-PACOM and, the Regional Marianas commander, we are now going through the whole site selection issues right now. The team just got back from site selection summit number 2, where we looked at all of those sites and where we could place those sensors, where you place the command centers, where you place the launchers, how you load the weapons in, what will be the required infrastructure coming downstream. So there's a lot of work in a very small place. Someone gave me the stat yesterday. I used to say it was no larger than the size of the city of Chicago, but it turns out Huntsville's just slightly larger than Guam. And so just to kind of put in perspective, that's the kind of constraints that we have there. And it's going to be tough because it's a tourist spot, right? And it's pretty far away, several time zones away. It's a real challenge. But I tell you, the partnership we have with the Army right now in terms of the systems, partnership we have with Navy in terms of site selection, really important. And we have full support from the department. And we're going to move out and meet that requirement. All right, next chart, please. All right, so this kind of takes me to the end of my discussion. I want to show you that GMD video here in just a second, but before I do that, I want to thank you again for allowing me to be here today. I've really enjoyed the conference. It's been a great experience seeing people, meeting some new folks that I haven't seen in a long time. It was great, and I want to thank industry for their support. The whole walk around outside is great. I walked away with a little marshmallow astronaut. I'll give that to my daughter. She'll love that. You guys know I'm going to keep it, right? All right, let's go ahead and show the video. Thanks.
It's been 20 years since the United States committed to the deployment of a homeland missile defense system to protect the country from states like North Korea. Following the 2004 emplacement in Alaska of the first ground-based interceptors, or GBIs, and activation of the system, the Missile Defense Agency has tested the ground-based mid-course defense, or GMD system many times, learning and making continuous improvements to the system. In the following scenario set in 2023, the GMD system is defending against 4 ICBMs targeting the United States. Space-based infrared sensors detect each missile and predict their impact points. The satellites cue the missile defense system through the Command and Control Battle Management and Communications System, or C2BMC, to alert forward-based radars. The ANTPY-2 radar, the Sea-based X-band radar, or SBX, and the Long-Range Discrimination Radar, or LRDR, acquire and track each missile as it ascends into space. The radars watch the missile engines burn out, with radars closer to the targets observing each payload separation. A decision is made on where to engage the threats and with how many interceptors. Radar search fans discriminate the most likely threat re-entry vehicle amidst the rocket debris, decoys, and other countermeasures. Warfighters fire a single interceptor to engage the first ICBM targeting the U.S. Warfighters launch 2 more interceptors to engage the second ICBM, and then turn their attention to defending Chicago and New York as the radars continue to pass data to the fire control nodes and cue the upgraded early warning radar at Beale Air Force Base. Warfighters launch a salvo of interceptors against the third ICBM warhead, headed to Chicago. The first, or lead interceptor, is followed by 2 more interceptors. Eyeing up the fourth and final ICBM, warfighters launch a single interceptor. Following ejection of its booster stages, the interceptor defending Seattle releases its exo-atmospheric kill vehicle, or EKV. The EKV adjusts its approach using small rocket motors. Using onboard sensors, it tracks the target scene, identifies the lethal object, and makes minor adjustments to its flight path, and destroys the ICBM warhead by force of impact. The LRDR and orbiting space-based kill assessment sensors confirm the hit, with sensors now tracking the second ICBM warhead. 2 more EKVs are released and speed towards the target cluster. Following rocket motor adjustments, the first EKV obliterates the target, and a split second later, the second destroys a nearby countermeasure object. This precise and carefully choreographed process is repeated as the 3 EKVs coast towards the ICBM warhead targeting Chicago. And finally, the last EKV approaches the 4th ICBM warhead and slams into it at a closing speed of 26,000 miles per hour to destroy the warhead. The LRDR and the space-based kill assessment sensors send timely hit assessment data to the system using C2BMC to confirm the intercepts and ensure that no further threats remain. Considerable work is being done today to improve America's homeland defenses and the GMD system. An extraordinary effort called the Service Life Extension Program is making important improvements to the GBI fleet in terms of capability and reliability, and a new missile field in Alaska is being constructed to house additional interceptors. With the next generation interceptor, an entirely new interceptor featuring state-of-the-art components and multiple kill vehicles will be fielded as early as 2028, which will be able to defend the U.S. against advanced ballistic missile threats in the coming decades. Missiles are a principal means for projecting military power, which makes missile defense a key component of integrated deterrence. 20 years on, it remains MDA's solemn duty to continue providing unmatched missile defense capability to America's warfighters in order to safeguard the U.S. homeland from ballistic missile threats.
All right. Hey, thanks very much. I want to share with you one last thing before I turn it over for questions. Is, I used to put out like a 12-bullet list of things that I'm worrying about every year, just to kind of get my team focused, right? And it is like all of you in these jobs where you're strategic, tactical in a millisecond. But I kind of thought hard and I said, if I got cornered and they said, what are your 3 priorities? That's priority 1, right? Homeland defense, the ground-based mid-course defense system, priority number 1. Priority number 2, because I do believe it is the most consequential, is the defense of Guam. And we're going to get that right through our great partnerships with the services. And then the third one is that emerging threat of hypersonic defense. So from the space-based capability that we need for the maneuvering threat, from the existing sensors we have today to get those tracks, through C2BMC to bring us down to do a layered defense today, sea-based terminal, tomorrow with the glide phase interceptor to give us that layered effect. That is priority number 3. So I just want to let you know that's where we're pointing right now. And thank you for your attention today. Really appreciate being here to be that guy that's standing between you and lunch. And Joe, questions?
Sir, I think your video, a combination of your video and your comments adequately addressed any and all questions we might have had and do have.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Appreciate it.
Well, when they say that you leave the best for last, that is so true. I mean, Admiral Hill and what he is doing for this country and what he is doing across all services is truly, it's wonderful. And sir, on behalf of the SMD Symposium, we're donating some dollars to still serving veterans in your name. Thank you very much. And it's very clear how important this is when you have General Carbler here, Command Sergeant Major, and you now, and 2 former SMDC commanders here. And I want to thank you for the agenda, both of you, but General Formica, it takes senior leaders to get senior leaders to come here and talk. Now, Admiral Hill, to be honest, he asked to be the last speaker on Thursday like he did last year because, 1, it draws a crowd, and 2, it pulls together many of the things that we have briefed over these last few days. So thank you all very much for attending. We have one last duty to do, is Brigadier General Bob McCaleb in the house. Oh yeah. Yeah, I would like to say that for Dr. Joe Fitzgerald, our civilian aide to Secretary of the Army, thank you. Yeah. Angie McCarter, our other MC for these things. We usually call her up in frantic. There she is. Thank you very much. She puts all this together. SCS with Henrietta. If you want to know our numbers, total was 5799, but who's counting? That's about 2,000 more than we've ever had. So thank you all very much for supporting this. And there's no pressure right now on Northrop Grumman and Bob. So Bob, there's a tradition that you pass the gavel to the next titanium sponsor. And so Bob, it is with great pleasure that I pass the gavel.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thanks. Here.
Thanks. Yeah, Lockheed did a great job this year, as everybody can see, and I appreciate, and it's been said before, but this thing doesn't happen without a whole lot of volunteers, as you know. So it's a unique event. Look forward to next year, and I'll see you there. Thanks.